Okay, so this has to be one of the weirdest of Jesus's parables, right? You have everything backwards in this parable. A dishonest manager, that's the title of the parable, is commended. The children of this world are more clever than dealing with their peers than the children of light, God's people. Use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves. It's no wonder that most preachers leave this one alone. Except for Methodist preachers. John Wesley did not leave this parable alone, so therefore those of us who are from the Methodist tradition cannot. John Wesley, of course, the founder of our Methodist tradition. And he made this text the basis for his sermon on the use of money, which is a marvelous sermon. And when we dive into this parable a little more closely, we can see why he chose this one for that particular sermon, especially when it comes to our topic today, which is Wesley's first rule for the use of money. And we're going to be looking at these over the next 3 weeks. The 3 rules are earn all you can, save all you can, and give all you can. So we're going to look at this parable in a little more detail by talking about earning all you can. My guess is this will be the most popular sermon in the series, because we don't talk about that very much, but it's a good thing. We begin with a rich man who has a household manager. Apparently, the wealthy man had heard through the grapevine that this manager was wasting his estate. Now, if you read the context of Luke chapter 16, if you go to Luke chapter 15, that particular chapter features the parable of the prodigal son. And what does the prodigal son do? He goes out and he wastes the inheritance that he's given. So we're kind of continuing the theme here in chapter 16. Money was entrusted, it was squandered in extravagant ways. So this manager knows he's about to get fired, and unlike the prodigal son, however, he wants to avoid winding up eating with the pigs. He knows he's not equipped to be a laborer, nor does his pride allow him to be a beggar. So he hatches a plan that begins with the question, what will I do? We get a sense of his inner thoughts. Interestingly, if you go back to Luke chapter 12, there's a similar character who has a similar kind of inner dialogue. In this case, it's a wealthy man who has a bumper crop from his harvest. And he says, what will I do with all of this? Well, he decides, I'm going to build bigger barns to hoard up this wealth for myself. Well, it turns out, of course, that's the wrong answer. In the parable, the man learns that he will die that very night, and who will get all this wealth that he has stored up for himself? You can't take it with you after all. It's sort of like playing with Monopoly money. Now, I know a lot of you have played Monopoly. Most of us have never played Monopoly all the way to the end of the game because it takes too long. But the goal of Monopoly is to earn everything. I learned everything I know about capitalism. The very first lessons I got about capitalism and money management, playing Monopoly with my cousins. I learned about interest. I learned about rent. I learned about savings. I learned about extortion. I learned about bank robberies. I learned about loan sharking. I also learned about natural disasters, like when the dog runs across the board and scatters all the properties, and then you fight over who actually had what to begin with. But the one thing that I really learned in playing Monopoly with my cousins is that if you get to the end, the goal is to do what? To own everything. If you own everything on the board, you are the winner. You've bankrupted everybody else. Yay for you. You are wealthy, rich, a massive property owner. You've got everything. But then, after a brief moment of celebration, all that money and property gets put back in the box. And the lid gets put on the box, and it gets slid under the bed until sometime later, somebody's going to pull out that box, open it up, and play with what was once your stuff. And here's the thing. If you think about it, all of us eventually go back in the box. And somebody, someday, is going to play with what was once your stuff. When we put it in that perspective, we realize that self-serving greed is foolishness. You can't take it with you. There are no U-Hauls attached to hearses, my friends. But here's the twist in the parable we're talking about this morning. The manager, even though he is dishonest, is far more shrewd than the wealthy barn builder. He recognizes that his future is not bound up in money, but rather in relationships. Having people around who will befriend him and care for him. So he hatches a plan. I know what I'll do so that when I'm removed from my management position, when I get fired, people will welcome me into their houses. So he contacts all of those who owe the master some debts. And he reduces their debt. You know, you got 900 gallons of olive oil. Hey, cut your bill in half and make it $4.50. You know, imagine your banker calling you up tomorrow. You get a phone call from your banker, which would be very weird, but you might. And the banker says, hey, I've got good news for you. We are cutting your $200,000 mortgage down to $100,000. How would that be? How would you feel about that? You'd be pretty psyched. You'd be very psyched. And how would you feel about the bank manager? Oh, this guy. Come on over for dinner, right? I want to get to know you better. This is good stuff. You're going to tell all your friends about what happened. That's the way this manager is thinking. You'll be a loyal customer. You'll be a friend. You'd spend the rest of your life telling people how awesome it is. So the manager starts reducing bills. He makes friends of those who are relieved of their debts. And in a backhanded sort of way, he also increases the reputation of his master. Because after all, once the manager has done this, would the master dare try to renege on the deal without damaging his goodwill? Oh, he's put him in a tough spot. So Jesus says the master commended the dishonest manager because he acted shrewdly. He acted cleverly. It was a win-win for the manager. He used his master's wealth to make friends and to boost the master's reputation while also taking care of himself. It's brilliant, really. But here's the kicker. Jesus says, this is how the people of this world do business. And in this, they are more shrewd than even the children of light. Jesus was talking to his disciples, but this is a shot at the Pharisees who saw themselves as pious children of light, but who were also lovers of money. Verse 14 tells us that the Pharisees overheard it, and they sneered at Jesus for pointing out their hypocrisy. I tell you, Jesus says, use worldly wealth to make friends for yourselves so that when it's gone, you'll be welcomed into the eternal homes. In other words, manage money in such a way that it has eternal value. Not by squandering it or by storing it in bigger barns or bigger bank accounts, but by using wealth in ways that will help you make friends with others and in ways that will increase the reputation of God, who is the one who ultimately owns everything in the first place. So what Jesus is talking about here is a matter of faithfulness. How we manage money has eternal implications. That's why it's a major topic in the Gospels. Remember, money itself is neutral, but the ways in which we use it are not. Jesus says that we can't love God and love money at the same time. We have to choose. Will we use money for our immediate gratification, like the barn builder? Will we squander it, like the prodigal son? Or will we use it with an eternal perspective as a way of securing favor with God and with others? This is the overall point of John Wesley's sermon on the use of money. Wesley was concerned that the people called Methodists who were gaining wealth and growing in economic status, that they use it as a means of pleasing God and helping others. It's in this sense that Wesley called money an excellent gift. Unlike many would assume of someone who was a preacher, Wesley was not anti-wealth, rather he was pro-faithfulness. When we manage our God-given resources well, we increase the reputation of God and we increase our goodwill among our neighbors. And so we come to John Wesley's first rule in this sermon on the use of money, and that is, earn all you can. It's a surprising piece of advice to hear in church, but Wesley saw it as an essential and a way of meeting the people of this world on their own ground. Like the rest of the world, we gain all we can, but the twist is that we do so with an eternal perspective that makes us even richer in relationships than we are in our bank accounts. Now, before we get to this rule, we want to look at some of the other rules. John Wesley was big into rules of life. And the three main Methodist rules we have to understand. If I gave you a quiz right now, how many of you would know the three rules of the United Societies? Anybody? Anybody? Okay, we got to teach you this. All right. I'm going to make Methodists out of you regardless, okay? The first rule is to do no harm. Do no harm. Good. Second rule, do all the good you can to the bodies and souls of people. And the third rule is to attend to the ordinances of God. In other words, attend to the spiritual disciplines that help us to be in love with God and our neighbors. Three simple rules. So for Wesley, earn all you can wasn't a rule about unbridled acquisition, but rather it was a part of this rule of life. It's a rule designed to help us be faithful stewards, knowing that the more wealth we gain, the more faithful to God and His kingdom we have to become. And so Wesley says, earn all you can, but in the sermon he gives some caveats. First, earn all you can, but not at the expense of life and health. We don't work so hard that we sacrifice our bodies in ways that are harmful to us. We shouldn't be sacrificing our health to earn money by working long hours with no rest, sacrificing sleep, or even by sitting too much. Even back then, John Wesley was concerned that people were sitting around too much. Oh, if he could see us now, right? We cannot sacrifice our families on the altar of wealth. Too many have done that to their detriment. Earning money is a good thing, but we can't love God and love money at the same time. When we choose to live in ways that demonstrate our love for God, it's then that our money tends to follow after that. The second thing he says is that we should earn all we can, but not at the expense of our minds. We must not earn money at the expense of our conscience by being involved in shady business tactics or engaging in activities that are harmful to our souls. We shouldn't cheat the government either and pay taxes that are due. Anything that weighs down our moral sense is too high a price to pay. And thirdly, he says, earn all you can, but not at the expense of your neighbor. We can't see ourselves and our economic activity in isolation. Even more so than in Wesley's day, we live in a global economy where people's lives are affected when bad financial decisions are made. It's a ripple effect. When we buy goods that are not fairly traded, we may be contributing to the virtual economic slavery of our neighbors, the two-thirds world. When we run a business in a way that intentionally crushes competitors by price fixing or other such practices, we're earning money at someone else's expense. Neither should we participate in activities that harm our neighbors' bodies, like selling items that can injure or contribute to addiction. Wesley also cautioned the medical profession of his day to not sell health services and medicines at such a steep price that people could not afford it, all in the name of profit. Oh, if he could only see us now. The bottom line for Wesley was to ask this question: does my economic activity profit the souls of others? If not, it needs to change. Exploiting others does not earn us their friendship, nor does it increase the reputation of God whom we claim to follow. Even the dishonest manager understood this. We should be as shrewd as we are faithful. Indeed, Wesley says that earning all we can should be the result of what he calls honest industry, that money follows our vocation. No matter what job we do to earn money, our primary vocation is to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. Whether we are digging ditches or working in an office or running a multi-million-dollar business, our calling is to represent Christ. And there is no more telling evidence of how well we do that than in the ways in which we earn, save, and give the money God has entrusted to us. Remember, it's not yours forever. As Wesley puts it, whatever you are called to do it with all your might. Hard, honest work is something that God gave to the humans he created as a gift. That's right there in Genesis 1. It gives us purpose and meaning, and it allows us to contribute to God's kingdom wherever we find ourselves. When we earn money under the umbrella of vocation, it tends to take on a different meaning. We earn money with a larger purpose in mind. And Wesley concludes we need to keep cultivating common sense wisdom about money. We need good advisors to help us manage what we earn. We need to establish good practices to monitor our spending so that we're not squandering our resources. Most of all, however, we must learn how to use wealth with an eternal perspective in ways that make us friends with others and that increases the reputation of the master whom we serve. One of the best examples in my life of someone who lived this way was my father-in-law, Jennifer's dad, Gene Headley. He passed away a few years ago, and I had the honor of officiating at his funeral. As I prepared for that day, one of the things I was struck by was the example that Gene left that matches the kinds of practices that both Jesus and John Wesley are talking about. Gene was a hardworking man. He was a pipe contractor, so he spent most of his days on a bulldozer or driving a truck, digging out old pipes and laying in new ones. His work was the definition of honest industry, and he loved doing it. Even when the onset of Parkinson's disease made it difficult for him to even hold a fork at the dinner table, when you put Gene behind a bulldozer, he was steady as a rock. He did his work with great pride, and he always finished the job to the customer's satisfaction, even if it meant putting in extra time. And when it came to money, Gene held things loosely. He wasn't always great at collecting when customers paid late. He did business according to circumstances rather than contracts. He did a lot of free work for people, and he was generous with the money that he did earn. He didn't earn as much money as he probably could have or should have, but he built relational capital with the people of Waynesburg, Pennsylvania, to the point that everybody knew who Gene Headley was. And everybody liked him. He was wealthy in friendships. He increased the reputation of God through honesty, generosity, and faithfulness. And he still did this while being generous and on time and spending time with his family. He and Carrie had 7 kids. Jennifer's the youngest of 7. And every night, no matter what happened during the day, Gene would come home after a hard day's work, wash up, have supper, and read a story to the kids before they went to bed. Often he fell asleep in the middle of it, according to Jennifer, but he was there with them every night. I can't help but read Wesley's sermon and think of him. He embodied the principles, and he will forever be an influence on me in that regard. You likely know people like this as well. We live in an area of the world where hard work is a virtue. There are people who live their lives as if they know that in the end, everything goes back in the box. They have an eternal perspective. They work for future riches and relationships with God and with others. Money for them is the tool to be used on behalf of others. So whether they have a little or a lot, they use it for good. We can learn a lot more from them than we can from the wealthy tycoons of this world. John Wesley tells us to earn all that we can so that we can make the best of what is in our hands. A shady household manager turned a bad situation into a beneficial one because he understood where real financial capital lies. It lies in relationships, in our relationship with God and our relationship with others. The better we understand this, the better our own financial lives will be. So some questions for you today to consider. In what ways are you earning all that you can according to these principles? In what ways may you be compromising these principles in order to build more financial barns for yourself? What practices in your business or in your spending do good to others? Or what practices harm them? These are important questions to consider if we're going to use money with an eternal perspective. Earn all you can. Save all you can. Give all you can. Remember, it all goes back in the box. How we use it. Well, that's what God will be concerned about.